Good night, Thursday night viewers, and welcome again to Let's Talk. I'm your host, John Mencius. The clock is ticking down to our date with history. It is now 27 days to the ICJ referendum, scheduled to be held on Wednesday, April 10th, 2019. As before, we're here this evening to discuss the burning issues surrounding the Belize-Guatemala dispute with people who have dedicated much time and energy to understanding and trying to resolve it. It is our version of no quarreling, no fighting. Let's talk. Tonight, we are joined by Ambassador James S. Murphy and Dr. Gilda Lewis. Welcome, Ambassador Murphy, and welcome, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you very much.
Ambassador Murphy, you have served as Belize's ambassador to the United States and as High Commissioner to Canada from 1996 to 2000, and you were also the permanent representative to the OAS during this time. On returning home, you were appointed as Senior Director of International Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs until you retired from the public service in 2002. However, you came back to work with the government again as Cabinet Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister from 2008 to 2012. And you're now serving in a voluntary capacity in the Public Awareness Campaign Unit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is preparatory to the referendum on the referral of the Belize-Guatemala question to the ICJ for final settlement. Most importantly for our purposes here tonight, this evening, Ambassador, you're considered by many to be one of the preeminent scholars on this Belize-Guatemala dispute, and you're the author of this book, The Guatemala Claim to Belize, which is a handbook on the negotiations. You have also produced various publications. That includes a document, well, a publication, Belize and Guatemala Court Time. Then also the Guatemalan Claim to Belize, a compendium of relevant documents, and also Belize at 27, still seeking a settlement with Guatemala. I think that might have been your last major publication.
I think so.
And Dr. Lewis, you are a decorated veteran in education and nationalism. You have been a community leader for all your life, Supreme Court mediator and arbitrator, family court mediator, magistrates court mediator, immediate past secretary or president of the Alternative Dispute Resolution Association of Belize. You have been a consultant during the DFC Commission of Inquiry and to Citrus Growers Association. But importantly, again, for purposes here tonight, you have a paralegal certificate, you have a bachelor's in education, a master's in education, and you also have a PhD in computing technology in education. And you have served as a resource person for various committees and commissions involved with trying to settle this dispute with Guatemala since 2000. That's the National Advisory Commission, the Advisory Committee on the Guatemalan Claim, where you served briefly as chair, and which has now transitioned to the Referendum Commission. Right. So again, we have this evening experts, nationalists who have been involved in this Belize-Guatemala dispute resolution. And so I want to start off by asking my first question to Ambassador Murphy. Why have efforts to resolve this Belize-Guatemala dispute so far failed?
Well, for a variety of reasons, but I'll be brief. The first attempt to settle this dispute over the Article 7 of the 1859 Boundary Convention actually took the form of a whole new treaty, the 1863 Supplementary Convention. Under the terms of this convention, Guatemala agreed to settle the dispute with Great Britain for £50,000 sterling. Unfortunately, the treaty was not ratified within the prescribed time, and it died.
Not ratified by whom?
Guatemala.
By Guatemala.
Guatemala.
Okay.
Guatemalans said that they were engaged in war with El Salvador at the time and hadn't gotten to it.
Okay.
Negotiations have been going on for about a century between Guatemala and Great Britain. Belize joined the negotiations in 1962, and then with independence in 81, the negotiations were between Belize and Guatemala.
Did Britain participate in the negotiations after independence?
It's my understanding, and I am subject to correction, that initially, yes, first couple sessions after independence. The Guatemalans put themselves in a bind because they initially took the position that they weren't interested in talking to Belize. They were interested in talking to Great Britain.
This is even after we had gotten
Even after independence.
Okay.
And the British response was, with the independence of Belize, we, Guatemala and Great Britain, have no territorial dispute.
Okay.
But the bottom line with the failure of the negotiations is that Guatemala has always demanded some Belizean territory as the price of settlement.
Right. We heard this the last time when we spoke with Ambassadors Rosado and Vernon.
Okay.
This is what they had said.
Specifically,
They explained.
what territory has varied from negotiating session to the negotiating session, but
All over the place.
everywhere from Ranguana, Zapadilla to the whole country. Sometimes they came with Moho River South, Monkey River South, Ranguana, Zapadilla, Sibun River South. They're varied. But the simple fact of the matter is no Belize Prime Minister is going to sit across the conference table from Guatemala and sign away Belizean territory. It's not going to happen. So negotiations failed, and as long as the Guatemalans require territory for settling, they're going to continue to fail.
But I think there was a mediation, right? That earlier, Betwell Webster, that was
That
an
was
American.
early on, yeah.
Right, but I think from Ambassador Rosado, I gathered that there was no proposal to cede Belizean territory under those proposals, but yet that did not meet
Under the
acceptance.
Webster?
Yes, or that is what I understood.
Well,
that,
I think we were going to be made like an associate state of
oh,
Guatemala.
so
or
while we
something
might
like
not
that.
have ceded territory, we might have lost some level of sovereignty, as it were. And maybe that was a problem with that.
The Guatemalans agreed to Britain granting Belize nominal independence. Nominal.
Okay.
But transferred responsibility for Belize's foreign affairs and defense to Guatemala.
Okay. And we rejected that.
Obviously. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, eventually everybody rejected it,
Okay.
including Great Britain. So that was 1965, mediation by the United States government.
Okay.
The facilitation process under the auspices of the OAS ran from 2000 to 2002.
Okay.
Under this initiative, Belize and Guatemala appointed facilitators. Belize appointed Sir Sridhar Ramphal, and Guatemala appointed an American attorney by the name of Paul Reichler to carry on negotiations in place of the government to government. The negotiation took place through these
So the
facilitators.
facilitators were at the forefront,
Yes, that's right.
and the negotiating teams from Belize and Guatemala
They acted
were
in
behind the scenes,
consultation
as it
with
were.
the governments, but the people up front, as you put it, were the facilitators.
Right.
One of by the way, the facilitators' proposals were very favorable to Belize. They provided for the existing land borders between Belize and Guatemala.
Okay.
One of the proposals was that within 75 days of the presentation of the proposals, the parties were to have simultaneous referenda
Okay.
on the proposals. Unfortunately, Guatemala reneged, said that they weren't in a position to have a referendum in 75 days. Okay. And eventually they rejected the proposals altogether, citing constitutional problems. After that, there was an agreement called the Agreement to Establish a Transition Process and Confidence Building Measures. What's important about that for us was that was the agreement that established the OAS office at the Benque border and established the Group of Friends of Belize and Guatemala.
And that continues up to date. That is what is in place.
Right.
Right.
And established a group of friends.
When was that set up?
That was set up in 2003, right after
Right.
the collapse of the facilitation
because
process.
I was putting to Ambassador Asada, I was making the case to him that people feel that this dispute does not need to be settled with any urgency because we have lived alongside Guatemala for 160 years. And I mean, Guatemala has not invaded us. There's been saber rattling and all that, but Guatemala has not.
But we have had creeping encroachments to change the picture on the ground.
What do you mean by
in the
that?
Chiquibul.
What do you mean by that?
They haven't invaded officially,
Right.
but they have. They're all over the Chiquibul.
Okay.
And we're losing a lot of money in there too. And they may be getting our water supply compromised.
Okay. But again, the point I was making is that we have been living alongside Guatemala. And the question was by me, what was the urgency? Because they have never invaded us and all these things. But what the ambassador explained to us is that they did not invade us because Britain was here until 1993. And then soon after Britain left, when they started to up the ante and, and started to threaten, then we were able to get them involved with the facilitation process. And then soon after that, we got the OAS involved. So basically what they were saying, it's because we have had measures in place all this while that something has not happened. I don't know what your view of this is.
Yes, I agree. The OAS has played a crucial role. And as a matter of fact, it's one of my concerns. If the country doesn't go to settle this thing at the ICJ, will the international community continue to finance the OAS office?
But Dr. Lewis, don't you think that Belizeans have felt that the OAS has failed us, especially with what has been happening on the SARS-2? Don't you think that that has been all the pushbacks against the OAS's involvement?
We do what we need to do. We protest. But if you look at my slide number 58,
okay,
maybe I can shed some light on why we need to do something.
Okay, maybe we can. Is this
And
it here?
this is on the international law.
This is it here? This is the slide provisions of
yes.
international law?
I
Okay.
got that out of the legal opinion. And really, the final paragraph down there.
This is the final legal opinion that was just released the other day?
No. This is the one that was released in
The one that you have
2002.
right there.
Okay, right.
Right.
By lot or
But
pact?
that paragraph 180 is giving us a serious warning because it's telling us that we can keep on protesting, but that is not going to protect us forever if we have the means of settlement and we choose not to settle.
Okay, that's very important.
That is very important.
Because basically what you're saying, we cannot simply kick the can down the road.
Well,
Because
it will catch up with us sooner or later.
Right, I see. So That's an important point. I want to switch. Well, sorry, you were making further points about why negotiations have failed.
The last point I would
Right.
say was the signing of the framework agreement and confidence building measures.
Right.
Framework agreement provided for a new round of negotiations, which once again failed. But what is significant about this is that it's the first agreement between Belize and Guatemala that recognized that a political solution may not in fact be possible by allowing the Secretary General to make a recommendation on referral of the dispute to the ICJ or arbitration.
Okay.
And that's eventually what he did. He did recommend to the parties submitting the dispute to the ICJ.
Right.
And in 2008, the special agreement to do that was signed by the parties, and that's where we are.
Were you any part of the formulation of this special agreement?
No.
Okay.
Before we leave this
Yes.
topic,
Right. Sorry, you wanted to.
the attempt to get land from Belize continued way into the facilitation process. We were being asked whether Belize would be willing to snake the border around Santa Rosa village and let that remain Guatemala, and in turn Guatemala would snake
Santa
their...
Rosa village was at that time occupied by Guatemalans.
It was a Guatemalan village. Had
But
been there
it was in our side of the
on
border?
our side of the border.
Right.
So we are being asked to snake the border around that. The
Okay.
British were asking us to do that.
But just that little piece.
And yes,
But
and
that's
then,
more than 1 square inch, right? So
Yes.
that's a problem.
and then in return, they would snake their border around the Maya site. I forget the name of it, where half of it is in Belize and half is in Guatemala.
Okay.
So they would snake it around that. I was at the meeting where that proposal was made, and I hit the ceiling, right?
Okay.
Because once you start giving, you can't stop. So we put that one out. We told them, no, that cannot happen.
So basically what you maintain the principle that not 1 square inch. That,
Right.
That was a principle on
Right.
which we...
But notice the timing, because this was in the middle of the facilitation process,
Right, and they were still trying to...
still trying to get land.
Right. So again, it means that they were resolute that land had to be on the table.
Yes,
And
yes.
basically, I guess you all are probably concluding what both Ambassadors Rosado and Vernon said to me and to us actually the last time, that the reason that negotiations fail is
Because
fundamentally because Guatemala was
not
insisting
going to
that they
get
wanted
any
land, and we were
land.
saying that you cannot get land.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I have another question here. Because much has been made of this Article 7 of the 1859 treaty,
Right.
and it appears from at least what I have read, that it was repudiated by Guatemala, the entire treaty, in 1946, which would be, 77 years after the treaty was signed. And we have heard that there was a 1931 treaty further to the 1859 treaty, the exchange of notes, which was seen as a confirmation of the 1859 treaty. So
And that really was an acquiescence by Guatemala.
actually 46 is 87 years later, actually 87 years later. Right, that is what,
In 1931, they acquiesced regarding the boundary,
yeah.
because they said that is a corollary to the treaty, the boundary treaty that went before.
But the question I want to put to both of you is, can the boundaries drawn by Article 1, by the provisions of Article 1, be somehow blotted out because there's a breach of the treaty, because Britain did not fulfill its obligations under Article 7? Because
No.
I understand that this would be the linchpin of Guatemala's
I think it's
arguments at the ICJ.
Article 62 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties that says, yes, you may have reasons for wanting to void a treaty, because a treaty is like a contract. between two people. It's actually valid, voidable, or void, depending on the circumstances.
Right.
But under Article 62, you cannot void a treaty if it has a boundary in there.
Is it that you cannot? Okay, so basically what you're saying there is that the treaty established a boundary.
And the boundary
And
lives
so the
on.
boundary survives any
Regardless the fate of the
Regardless.
treaty.
Right.
Regardless.
And it doesn't take account how long after Guatemala maybe started to protest, or probably the 87 years was too long anyway. Isn't
Well,
that so?
I think Article 45 of the Vienna Convention deals with that too, where they take too long, and because they have taken so long, they have been acquiescing all of that time. So now
Okay.
you can't turn it back and unacquiesce.
I see.
If you look at a recent judgment, well,
ICJ
not
judgment.
recent, but yeah, it was in 1960 between Nicaragua and Honduras. Let's look at slide number 5, because I have it set out there.
Slide number
And the
5.
number 5.
Okay.
And the dilly-dallying was only 6 years. Guatemala's dilly-dallying is like 86 years.
Right,
All right,
80
so let's
odd
look
years.
at that and see.
Okay.
Right? This was their boundary dispute and arbitration award and all that.
Okay.
Right? But even the amount of time they spent trying to settle it with mediation and all of that, they spent 52 years trying to settle that. And then Honduras got fed up and took it to court and won. Because when the King of Spain gave the arbitration award, Nicaragua accepted it. Sent a telegram to Honduras saying, you know, congratulations, we got this thing settled, we're neighbors, blah, blah, blah. And the following year, published it in their official government gazette. Then I don't know what happened in the intervening 6 years, whether their young people were making a lot of noise or what it was. But 6 years later, they suddenly decide that that arbitration award isn't valid. Then they spent 52 years trying to solve it with mediation and
And
negotiation.
they finally went to court.
Went to court, and the court ruled in favor of Honduras. And if you read the
So what you're
judgment-
saying, ours would be a much longer time.
Yes, and in the judgment, the judges said that after having expressly accepted the award by their words and by their deeds, it's not open to them now to turn the clock
Which
back.
is similar to them signing the 1859
Right,
treaty.
and that was only for 6 years.
Right, right.
What will they tell them about 86 years? Right?
Right. So I want to switch again. Sorry that I have to be asking you questions from all about the place, but these are questions that are being asked out there, and you
Right.
all are the experts, so we need to ask you these questions. Some have proposed ditching seeking a binding settlement at the ICJ and going the way of trying to get them to provide a non-binding advisory opinion.
There are two very telling reasons why that doesn't make a lot of sense. Western Sahara and Israel and Palestine. Those were advisory opinions.
Okay.
Western Sahara has been occupied by Morocco for, I don't know how many years. A lot of people have died. And Palestine keeps on losing its land to Israel, and that was an advisory opinion. So
But
you can't rely on an advisory opinion because it is not binding.
But isn't that what Belizeans who are saying no to the ICJ are afraid of? They are afraid of the finality of a binding pronouncement by the ICJ. What if the ICJ says, well, from the Sibun to the Sarstoon
So
is for
okay.
Guatemala, then that is binding. At least if it's an advisory opinion that they give, we can we have some time to try to sort it out. I think that might be the thinking.
But what if we get a non-binding advisory opinion and Guatemala decides to invade the same way Morocco has invaded Western Sahara? What do we do then?
But I guess somebody might say, well, what if you get a binding judicial settlement and they invade?
Then you go to the Security Council.
Okay, so
there is provision for that in the UN Charter.
Okay, so you have...
The Security Council is like the policeman in Belize City. When you and I have beef, the policeman will come and tell us, you know, you cool it off, but you still have to go to court.
Right.
So the Security Council will try and cool it down, but it still has
I had
to...
heard Dr. Asad Schumann on a show on Channel 7 with Jules Vasquez, and he was basically saying that even if you have a treaty, you cannot get the Security Council involved because that treaty is just between the two parties.
Oh yes, if it's not an ICJ
So
judgment.
it would have to be that the ICJ would have to pronounce on the treaty,
Yes.
and then you get the security.
Then the Security Council.
So
will
basically then, all this while that we were negotiating and there was mediation and so on, the outcome of those would have been a treaty. Wouldn't it?
Yes.
And the treaty, so even if we had a treaty, there's a chance that at some point in time, Guatemala could say, you know what?
Yes,
I'm
and
not,
put something else in their constitution like what they have done before.
well, I guess the question is, Ambassador Murphy, well, then why were we going that route when it would not have provided a final settlement to dispute?
Well,
I mean, I guess were we feeling that we would be able to live with our neighbor in peace? I guess because other countries have not had to go to the ICJ to resolve any problem, and they have lived in peace. So maybe we thought that we could do that with Guatemala.
Yes.
But after 160 years, I guess we have changed our mind.
Yeah.
There is a big difference between PEACE and PIECE, okay? Guatemala wants PIECE, and we want PEACE.
Oh, PIECE.
And
So they want-
never the twain shall meet if we don't get a judgment.
The settlement of this dispute requires a legally enforceable
Yes.
ruling. Now, I know that frightens some people.
Right.
But,
It does.
But
Because they're looking at the downside.
you see, but the problem I have with that is I am yet to hear on what basis the ICJ would rule against Belize.
Right.
Well, you know, some people are saying out there, and they're not necessarily conspiracy theorists. They're saying out there that Guatemala might have some ace up its sleeve. Maybe some document. I think the last legal opinion we had gotten from the UWIP professor
Bassiani.
was reminding us that we need to make sure that the archives are properly researched and all
Well,
that.
of course, Belize has been doing that as far as I know.
But what is the possibility that some document is out there that would give Guatemala some edge that we don't know of?
It can't be a secret treaty because
Right, because it
treaties,
would have to be
treaties have to
between
be
the two.
registered, right?
Right. And I think you all are aware of the extensive work done by the U.S. Lawyer Manley Hudson.
I think the whole secret thing came up when we heard some noise being made about the 1992 joint statement, because that wasn't generally known
Okay.
to the populace, right? It had been published in the book that came out after Belize made its case to the OAS, that book that came out where Belize and Guatemala made their presentations to the OAS.
Okay.
I think I have that thing here.
Well, also, it was circulated to all member states of
It's
the UN.
in here,
Okay.
right?
This is
So
by-
it was not secret, but it wasn't generally consumed in Belize.
And
as
you think
such,
that
right?
maybe that is what
because
people-
when I heard the 1992 joint statement being discussed, that it is this secret thing and nobody knew about it, I am saying, but that was not secret. And that the thing, the document, bring it up, number 38.
Can we bring it up?
it said what is true, and you know an agreement has whereas,
Right, the preamble.
and then now, therefore.
Right.
So the first time the thing was coming up, we were only hearing about the whereas, and we weren't hearing about the now, therefore. And I said, gosh, that sounds just like the man who jump up and say, the Bible says there is no God. But he never read the rest of the verse. The fool had said in his heart, right? Because when you get to the now, therefore, you say exactly what it's all about. And that by that now, therefore, Guatemala has actually acknowledged Belize's sovereignty, because they say that in future they will
This is the 1992 joint statement.
Look at it down there.
Where is that?
They will be referring to the existing reference markers, so they have acknowledged. Because you can't have reference markers if they haven't acknowledged the boundary.
Okay.
Right?
So
maybe they think that's an ace up their
the
sleeve.
secret document that people were thinking was secret was not a conspiracy.
That was what I was hearing.
And
was a
on
secret
that
thing.
note, Doc and Ambassador, we will go to break, and when we come back, we will continue.
Belizeans have been asking, what if Guatemala refuses to respect the court's decision when they rule in our favor? By signing the special agreement in 2008, Guatemala must accept and respect the ICJ ruling. They must also follow the agreed process to fully demarcate the border after the court's ruling. If they fail to do this, Belize can take the matter to the UN Security Council.
Be informed. Visit our website or social media pages.
On April 10th, 2019, Belizeans will determine whether the dispute arising from Guatemala's claim should be settled at the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. Know the facts. Our boundaries with Guatemala were established in the Convention of 1859 between Britain and Guatemala. But problems arose in the 1930s about the meaning of Article 7 of that convention. The British proposed that they take their differences to the World Court to settle the problem peacefully in accordance with international law. But Guatemala refused and instead laid claim to Belize's territory. From the 1960s, every government has been making efforts to settle peacefully Guatemala's unfounded claim. But all those previous attempts failed. We now have a chance to settle it finally and peacefully at the ICJ. Are Belizeans willing to stand up for our good title to Belize's land and sea in court? And to demand that the ICJ tell Guatemala, leave Belize alone? Register to vote. Be informed. And on 10th April 2019, you decide.
True or false? Guatemala has taken over the Sarstoon. False. They've been trying to bully Belize, but Belize has never given up sovereignty or control of our side of the river. A ruling from the ICJ in our favor can get them to stop once and for all.
Be informed. Visit our website and social media pages.
And welcome back, TV viewers. We're here with Ambassador James S. Murphy and Dr. Gilda Lewis, and we're going to continue from where we just left off. And you wanted to talk about the confidence-building measures.
Yes,
because you were saying that people
are
don't understand
about
them
that.
and are scared
Number
about them.
37.
So maybe you can start discussing what you...
All right. The background to that, as you can see, was after they kidnapped our people and all of that stuff. And so this confidence building thing is an international mechanism for keeping the peace. It's nothing dangerous or insidious. It's an accepted international mechanism for disputing countries to keep the peace while they try to get to a solution. So that was being set up. But I was sitting around the table when that thing was being discussed, and I have to tell you the honest truth. I didn't understand it that way, and I was banging on the table. I was banging on the table saying, you can't do that. You can't just not say boundary. You have to say boundary. And then I was made to understand that you can't put in boundary, because if you do, Guatemala will not sign it. Then we would have had no keeping the peace if I had had my way. Right?
But again, maybe that is
so
the basis.
It was.
Maybe that is the basis for the fears that you're
Yes,
talking about.
yes,
that the boundary
yes,
was replaced by an adjacency zone.
right.
But you're saying, in fact, it wasn't. Not from
The
our point of view.
The adjacency line is the exact same boundary. Because I was even saying, well, if you want Guatemala feel good, man, just put adjacency line / boundary. No, you can't do that because they won't sign. So we had to go with adjacency line. But we got the benefit from it, right? The OAS has been very effective in keeping the peace, and we have had no other kidnapping of Belizeans, right?
And so that adjacency zone, 1 kilometer on both
Right.
sides, that's not a, well, no man's land, so to speak.
No. On our side, it is Belizean territory, and on Guatemalan side, it is Guatemalan territory. But what happens is you won't find Belizeans over there.
Exactly.
When you find Guatemalans over here, and it's within the 1 kilometer, they are escorted back to Guatemala because the OAS verifies that they're where they should not be and blah, 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 and they go back. When we find them outside of the 1 kilometer, we arrest them and we put them in jail. Right?
So basically, what's the purpose of the adjacency zone then?
It's to stop
It's like a buffer.
the violent incidents that were prevalent before that. We had people trying to chop up Belizeans and a whole lot. When I first got appointed in 2000, we were in crisis mode because right after I got appointed, they kidnapped our people.
But again, your point, it has helped.
But this thing has worked, right?
Okay.
And we need to let people look at it again, bring it again, because there's some disinformation about it, right? And the bullets tell you exactly what it's all about. We're not giving up anything because each party expressly reserves its right with respect to its claims of sovereignty. Nobody has given up anything. Neither party will use the CBM against the other in any forum, so this thing can't even go to the ICJ, right? The adjacency line is the same, but we expressly reserve our rights. Both parties, again, expressly reserve our rights. That is the third bullet. And the fourth bullet says that this line does not constitute a determination of the international boundary between Belize and Guatemala, because it is a peacekeeping thing. It hasn't given away anything.
And I would just add to what Dr. Lewis says, it's the confidence building agreement of 2000 specifically says that on the territory to the east of the adjacency line, the laws of Belize apply.
Apply, yes.
And territory to the west of the adjacency line, the laws of Guatemala
Apply.
I don't know about you, but it sounds to me like one border.
So, I want to go to this question here, along the same lines of the concerns and fears that Belizeans have, and with respect to going this ICJ route, right? There are a number of people saying it is just too risky. And there's this broad term being bandied about that the litigation risk involved is unknown and we can get a surprise. And I assume that by litigation risk, again, Guatemala might be able to produce some document in there, and you
Well,
have already
I-
knocked that down.
I-
Or maybe
I-
that they're probably even thinking that the judges can be bought out. These are all the things that are out there.
Well, we can look at the slide that I have about the judges, but to come back to the Sibuntu Sarstun, the ICJ has tried 33 cases, many of them among the same Central American countries, because ever since they took their independence from Spain, they have been quarreling with each other about
The
boundaries.
ICJ has tried 33 cases
33
since
cases,
its inception in 1945.
Yes, where
Right.
there was boundary and treaty and boundary.
Okay.
And they settled the cases and they did not change any boundary, right?
So you're saying in every case, no boundary was changed?
No, they have not. And in fact, they
Okay.
tell you, let's go to, I'll tell you right where, in their own words,
Which slide, so we can,
number 17.
slide 7.
This is the actual judges saying this, not Dr. Lewis, right? The part that is in bold capital letters. The court's task is neither to effect a delimitation, de novo, meaning from the get-go, nor a demarcation. They don't do that. They take the evidence that has been presented to them, and if they confirm that the treaty and the boundary is okay, then that is what they put in their judgment. In their judgment, they say the boundary is blah, 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 and it is exactly as stated in the treaty. And then the demarcation, I think people are a bit confused between delimit and demarcate too.
Well, and determined too.
The limit means you just describe the thing on paper or on a map.
Right.
Demarcate, I'll get to determine. Demarcate means that you go there and you put down the boundary pillars. The ICJ isn't going to get into that. And that is why in the special
So,
agreement we
just-
say 3 months later you appoint.
Just to help the viewers out there, so what the treaty, the 1859 treaty did was delimited the
The
boundary.
limit, yes.
Okay, so that was done.
No,
I think
and
the
during
word
the-
that's used is define.
Right.
Right.
During the Guatemalan referendum, I listened to a Guatemalan, I think he had served in Belize too, and he was saying that actually the boundary between Guatemala and Belize is their only boundary that does not have cement pillars. All the other boundaries have. So out of this ICJ judgment, if we go there, they could get that demarcated, which would satisfy them, and it would satisfy us. But we have to do it.
But the special agreement, what the
Provides
compromise
for
says that we are asking the ICJ to determine, right, the boundaries between Belize and Guatemala. Isn't that what it says? But I'm not.
But
I don't
English
want
language can confuse
misquote it.
people a lot, you know. In fact, when I was teaching in England, I had to be teaching English children English because they were confused, right?
Okay.
Because you have one word that has a lot of different meanings. You have 2 words that are spelled the same way, different, but they sound the same way, and you know, they get quite confused. So determine. When I first heard this determine thing, that it means that the ICJ can go and determine a new boundary, I decided to consult my dictionary, because that's where I go very often. And I found that the first meaning of determine says that your mental condition will determine the decision you make. So basically, if you're crazy, you will make a crazy decision, all right? Second one
Cause and
says, the coroner's inquest will determine the cause of death. The third one says, the general in the army will determine how best to position his forces so he can win the war. And I need to pause right there because we had that same thing in the Battle of St. George's Caye. Captain Moss was sent here about a year ago to make preparations because they knew that Guatemala was assembling this armada in Bacalar. So sooner or later it would come. And Belize got assistance from Jamaica, right? So he came and he was to make preparations. And his way of making preparations was to go out every day in his boat with his plumb line to measure the depth of the water. People ashore didn't know what he was doing. And they started grumbling, and this man, he not waste of time. I mean, he come here for make preparation, he don't have go out every day, go fishing, right? But when the 10th of September came around, he was able to determine the best place to put his little amount of boats. So what Spain had to come across the shallow water to get to them, and got all confused, you know, getting aground and getting stuck and all that, and having to turn around and go back, because he determined the best place to put his boats. Now, the final meaning in a legal context is that the court will determine the issue and bring it to an end. But it will only bring it to an end after examining the evidence. They don't wake up suddenly one morning and stand on their head instead of standing on their feet and make a determination, right? They have to go through a whole long period of examining the evidence and listening to what people are telling them and telling the people, because I saw this in the Cameroon judgment. They were telling Nigeria, but you already have acknowledged the sovereignty of Cameroon. Because when you go to visit your people in Cameroon, you apply to the authorities for permission to go there.
Right.
And when you wanted to do oil exploration, you attached a map to show that where you wanted to go was in Cameroon waters. So you already acknowledged the sovereignty. We have two cases in Belize that are similar. Oil exploration, in 1992, Guatemala put out an advertisement to invite oil companies to apply for oil exploration licenses to search for oil in Belizean waters, right? Okay. Belize got wind of it and protested. Guatemala apologized and withdrew the advertisement, acknowledging our sovereignty. In the special agreement, the commandant of a village somewhere beyond Garbert's Falls applied to British Honduras for permission to pass through British Honduras on the way to Mexico. Permission was denied, but the fact of having to apply means that you're acknowledging sovereignty. And like I said, in that 1992 joint statement, they acknowledged it again. And the ICJ pick up on every little thing that goes to them by way of documentation, right?
So you obviously have researched these ICJ cases extensively.
I have looked at a lot of, well, not a lot, but I have looked at Cameroon, Nigeria, Libya, Chad. I've looked at Honduras and Nicaragua, and recently at Costa Rica and Nicaragua. That was in 2015. I've looked at Malaysia and Singapore, and Indonesia and Malaysia. Those last two were not decided on the basis of treaty. Right. They were decided on the basis of administration.
Right. But before you get there, first of all, you have given us a lot of comfort by informing us that your research has shown that of the 33 cases that came before the ICJ, right, that none of them ended up with changing any boundary.
No, no. And like they told you that it's not their business to go and demarcate nor delimit.
But you had also told me earlier that wherever a treaty was involved, that is the first thing that the court looked at.
Well, let's look at the ICJ statute.
And I think that is what the legal opinions have been
number
saying
46.
46, that's slide number 46.
Uh-huh. That's 46 or that's 48?
That's 46 from what I'm seeing.
Well, then it's supposed to be 46. That looked like 48, man.
There's judgments on the...
That's 48.
It is 46. It's 46.
It's 46?
Yeah, it's 46. What are you looking for?
I'm looking for, oh no, it is Malaysia Singh. No, that's not what I'm looking for.
You're right.
I'm looking for the statute, 45. Yeah. That is the ICJ statute. And in my opinion, we put an anansi on Guatemala because Article 38.2 would have brought in estoppel and equity and all of that. But they
Right.
can't go there because we have requested them to go on the 38.1. They can't
38.1.
go there. So first they look at treaties. And if they find
That's international convention.
that is, yes.
Right.
You know, Shakespeare says, what's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So if you call the rose bowel movement, it will still smell like a rose, right? So the name doesn't really carry a lot of weight. And in actual words, our treaty doesn't say the word treaty. It says convention.
Right. But it's a treaty.
It's a treaty, right?
And it's a boundary treaty,
It's
you're
a
saying.
boundary. Well, no, when it says boundary, you know it's boundary.
Right.
But that comes under the Vienna Convention. Here now, if they find a treaty, they don't really need that is valid because it was signed and it was ratified and so on. They don't really need to look any further, right?
Okay, so you are saying in this case then that the 1859 treaty,
Yeah.
once they find that that is valid,
They don't really
then
need
that
to
is
go-
it.
They don't need to go anywhere else. But if,
But
for,
hasn't-
if by chance, you know, they may have, Guatemala comes with some Article 7 or something, or that they inherited Belize from Spain and all of that, and they want to really deal with that, they may decide to look at item B.
because I think one of the arguments that was made is that this 1859 treaty is a treaty of cession. That is what Guatemala
They will,
would probably argue.
They will argue that it was a treaty of cession.
And because Britain did not fulfill its obligations under
Right.
Article 7, then what they had ceded, they will now take back. Isn't that your understanding, Ambassador Murphy?
But then they
Yes,
come up
yes.
against the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties again, because I think it is Article 62. I'd have to look it up. But it says that you interpret a treaty according to the normal meaning of the words and the context in which the treaty was made.
So
So
maybe,
nowhere in 1859 do you see the word cession. You say boundary, boundary, boundary all over the place.
I think we'll have to wind down soon. So what I want to do is start right at that point and come down. What is Guatemala up against at the ICJ? You have started off with the first thing they will face is the 1859 treaty.
Right.
Right. Okay, maybe you can try to take us through that. They will be faced with the 1859 treaty and they will have to prove, I guess, that it's not valid. Is that where we start?
Let's look quickly at number 29.
Right.
Let's look quickly at number
29.
29 because that sets out what I have distilled from what they have been writing. And I also distilled the same thing from the document that I have where they presented their case to the OAS, where we have ours in that little book.
Right.
But I have the Guatemalan document where they presented their case. And basically they're saying, that's not the one.
This is 29.
26.
26.
26.
Not,
That's the Guatemala position, basically.
okay.
And this was written by a Guatemalan who calls himself a hardliner and has been on the Comisión de Belice and all of that. And he wrote that in 2012. So I would think that is the most recent, right? But it's not different from what they have been saying before. They will go with treaty of cession.
Okay, so that's the first thing. They will have to first prove that that treaty is a treaty of cession.
They
Okay.
cannot prove that because the Vienna Convention says you take the normal meaning of the word. And cession doesn't mean boundary. And our treaty, in the heading, it says boundary.
But let us say,
Preamble boundary. Article 1, 2, 4,
but
6,
let us
boundary.
say for argument's sake, they're able to cross that hurdle. And they're able to get the ICJ somehow. And remember now, we are dealing with the 0.0001% of what could happen. But let's try to delve in there.
So
they are
they-
able to convince the ICJ that the treaty was a treaty of cession. Now, what will they have to do to prove that it was a treaty of cession?
They will have to tell the ICJ to go against the UN Charter, against the ICJ statute, against the UN Commission on the Law of the Sea.
No, but I guess
And
I'm trying
the,
to...
the ICJ is bound by those. They can't go outside.
No, but I guess what I'm trying to do is to put it in, well, practical terms. They would have to prove that they owned Belize.
By some kind of treaty or by succession from Spain.
Right. So I'm trying to understand what they will have to do. Because if they're saying it's a treaty of cession, then you can only cede what you own.
What is yours?
Right.
Right. So they came into they became independent in
1821.
1821. So between 1821 and 1859, when they signed the treaty, that is the time during which they would have to show that they
That they somehow
own Belize.
own Belize.
And is there any way that would be
They
possible,
haven't-
Ambassador?
I don't believe so.
They have never done any administration.
I
The only
don't
time
believe
they
so.
tried to do administration by giving two land grants. And Britain protested about that, and the two land grants came to nothing.
But other than that, between 1821 and 1859, Britain was effectively in
Yes.
control of here.
Yes.
So Guatemala, you are saying, will be hard-pressed to prove that they own Belize anytime between 1821 and 1859. So that's the first hurdle they will face.
Yes. But what Professor Bastiani has told us was that even if they managed somehow to convince the judges that they did have this succession, they had already received their succession by the time they, as a sovereign nation in 1859, signed the treaty with Britain as a sovereign nation.
Okay.
And so, yeah, they might say that, you know, the succession
This is inheriting Belize, as it were.
from Spain,
From Spain.
right?
Right.
But after they inherited it, then they signed the treaty.
Okay. So they gave it away. That's what but again,
But they now say that they gave it away as cession, which cannot stand.
okay. But, okay, finally, I guess, is there, let's say, okay, somehow it is agreed that they gave Belize away. Will they probably have a case maybe at least to claim what, compensation?
Let's look at number
Article
24,
7.
which is Professor Bastiani's summary.
Okay.
He sets it out nicely.
It's 34?
24.
24?
24.
24.
Right? Somehow I managed to get his many pages of summary onto one slide.
Okay.
But this is what it's
Maybe you
saying.
could walk us
Right.
through it, Doctor.
Okay. In his conclusion, in paragraph 58, it looks like, he had A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those were his conclusions that he set out. When you look at A and B, he's saying that through occupation, Britain's title as Belize's predecessor crystallized as a right in 1821. And so in B, he says Guatemala had no title in 1821. Now, he's trying to look at both sides. So he looks at, or there is this uncertainty about whether Guatemala succeeded to Belize from Spain or whatever. But if you look there is some uncertainty, maybe, but the UK will prevail because of the length of time it administered, which would bring it under 38.1b. 38.1a
That is
is
effective
treaty.
occupation.
Right. B.
Okay.
Guatemala has never administered anything in Belize apart from when it tried the two land grants, right? So he's telling us that even if Article 7 was breached,
Right.
even that if they try, then they put themselves in a dilemma.
Okay, so I guess we will have to wrap up now. We have run out of time again. It's
Right.
an hour. So, 1821 to 1859, right? Guatemala would have to have shown that it owned Belize during that time.
And that it administered.
And there's no proof at all of that. In fact, there's proof of the opposite.
contrary.
That the UK is who was administering Belize. And I guess what you were, the point you were just making is that even previous to 1821, there's also contention as to whether Spain really had title to Belize.
Spain did not.
So Spain could not have had
Passed
title to
on.
Belize because, sorry, it could not have passed on title because it did not have title because Britain was again effectively occupying this area.
Yes.
So Guatemala now
Can
could not
succeed.
have succeeded Spain in any way. So
Right.
yeah, right. So there are many hurdles. Ambassador, your last word on the
You
matter?
took the words right out of my mouth, John.
That
What you just said. I think it's important to point out that the British occupation and administration actually predates 1821.
Yes, from 17, whatever they were here.
Whatever, the
it was
British
actually from the 16th.
were effectively running the place.
Right. And your final word in 30 seconds, Dr. Lewis.
In 30 seconds, I would encourage people who are still uncertain to try and find out as much as they can. When I go and make a presentation, I leave my telephone number. If people want to follow up anything with me, they can call me, 223-2886, which is by my computer. If they call that and I don't pick up, it's because I'm not sitting there, I'm somewhere else in the house, then they get me at 223-5448. I'm willing to talk anytime with anybody.
And with that, thank you, Ambassador Murphy. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. A very interesting conversation with you tonight. And TV viewers, thank you for tuning in. And we will return next Thursday for a third episode of Let's Talk. Good night.